We're live.
1 2 1 2.
How long are we doing this for? And I still can't press record on the thing.
So,
Do you find like in the winter, I always look forward to like having that downtime, but when it comes, I always feel like all the small tasks then become bigger.
Yeah.
Like small, just updating a couple of photos on the website feels like, oh, I've got to designate, got to get out, have a walk first to make sure I'm
Limber
ready
up.
for this. Yeah. Do some stretches.
I felt that I leave so much to go, oh, well, I've got like 2 or 3 months of quiet time, so it'll be fine. I'll get to all that stuff then. And now that we've hit the beginning of March, that you're like, there's still quite a bit on that list.
Yeah.
First weddings this month, and haven't really got to that stuff.
Yeah. So when does your season sort of start?
So my season doesn't start until the end of March. I think I've got the first one's a midweek, and it's like the 20-something of March.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the beginning for me. So I have still kind of got a few weeks, but I'm off to Scotland next week for 4 days. To the Thrive conference for
Nice.
Photography Farm.
Yeah.
So by the time I come back from that, and then to kind of again start to get things, think about kind of starting to get things ready. Kind of get the kit out and kind of sort all those little bits out and stuff. And
Yeah.
it'll soon be here.
Yeah. Definitely.
But you started, haven't you? You had your first one. Like you're off the mark.
Yeah, I had my first one last week. It was very wet, but it was a nice one because when you sort of, I mean, it hasn't been that long really since we did our last one at the end of the year. To be fair, so it's only been like less than 2 months. But when you need something just to like keep you going, keep your hands on the camera, especially when I don't do anything else with a camera except film weddings. I don't do any corporate.
Yeah, so I've still been shooting odd content stuff or just bits and bobs. So I have a camera with me at least weekly. Yeah.
So so it's nice to have something in the middle which isn't a multiple location, getting ready at a house, going to a church, going to a venue. It was all in one place. It was like very like simple in terms of logistics and everything, and it was just nice, like a nice day. So,
I think if you always think of that curve of weddings, like kind of in a season that most people do kind of start slow at this time of year and then kind of finish slower in like October, November, that if you literally came along on a flat line and then just hit a wall of like, if you had nothing till like June, and then it was like you went from literally 0 to 100. I think there is like, again, whilst it's, we've been both been doing this job long enough that I still agree. I think a lot of it is like riding a bike that as soon as you arrive back at that prep, you're like, okay, I'm in now. But I still find for me that first wedding every year, I get in the car on the way home and go, you didn't do that. Like normally it's a really silly thing. Like I forget to turn the house lights off before doing like a portrait prep.
Yeah.
Like some of you think you should know how to do this. And when you're shooting weddings weekly in the summer, it just literally becomes second nature. Yeah. But it's like the most time you always do a really good job, and it's nice to kind of that muscle memory does kick in. But for me, it's always like little silly mistakes like that I find I make at the start of the year.
Yeah.
So to start slower and kind of build that momentum is definitely welcomed, I think. Yeah.
And that's kind of why those winter weddings are good. I mean, last year I had a long period over winter where I didn't film anything. I think it was you're talking 3 months or something between filming anything. So like you say, then you come out, you get out of those habits, and you rock up and you're like, or you like look back at the footage, you're like, why didn't I turn that off or whatever?
Yeah.
And winter weddings, so I described it to Josh the other day, and I was like, I think they are generally easier logistically because there's like obviously. In the summer, you have a whole nother section in the evening where you're probably fitting in more groups, like in terms of like maybe bridal party stuff, champagne sprays, extra couples, that kind of thing. Whereas in the winter, generally after dinner, not much happens except the first dance. So logistically easier, but also in terms of trying to make it look good. It was a rainy, dark day in what is a kind of rusticy, dark barn anyway.
Yes.
So it was very much like it's just orange. It's just going to be orange.
I find you really are, aren't you, at the mercy of the weather? Because I think I remember having February weddings before where the couple have actively booked them so that it wasn't super hot. Yeah. And then you've had a freak day where, fair enough, it's not been super high temperature, but it's been sunny and it's been really bright and really and you're like, wow, I never expected this. And then but then on the flip side of that, the day before or the day after might have literally just been torrential rain the whole day, freezing cold. And I think you can plan, I think, a lot less for the weather like at that time of year, can't you? Like,
yeah, definitely. But I think luckily the couple that really kind of expected that, and the bride in the morning said, if I'd have put this in July and it was this weather, I'd be so fuming right now. And I said, like you don't understand. The last 2 Julys have been
like that,
pretty bad. And they booked their, wedding in February, and they booked lots of different like musicians and things like that throughout the day.
Nice.
So like they had budget left over for that, which actually ended up making the day quite really nice, even though it was raining. So
I think that's it, isn't it? Is if you have couples that get married at either end, whether it's like the end of winter or the beginning of the year, you've just got to hope that they are doing it, or they have that honest expectation that it's not going to be a summer wedding, it's just a bunch cheaper because the venue they're picking out of season.
Yeah.
You've really got to kind of embrace that it is a not peak or not summer wedding, and say and use. And I always find that kind of speak to people in the kind of beginning process and say, well, okay, what have you got lined up? Because the chances are we won't be having cocktail hour outside, or also though, I always think that my best dance floors sometimes are in those ends of the year.
Yeah.
Because there's too many distractions. I shoot a lot of outdoor weddings or a lot of venues where there's big outdoor space, and they have the first dance and a couple of tracks afterwards, and everybody just disappears back outside to go and drink their wine and chill in the courtyard or do whatever, and then the party doesn't come back round till probably the last hour of the wedding, and by then, like, sadly, I'm gone. So, or sometimes you find you have to wait longer to even get enough dancing from the evening, where at like a wedding just before Christmas or a wedding this time of year, it's pitch black and it's miserable outside. So if you're not dancing, you're still in the venue though, aren't you? And so it always feels kind of a bit busier. I think, at a wedding.
Either on the dance floor, you're sort of hanging around the dance floor, sort of thing.
Which is easier to get someone lured in or do whatever. I always find that I get what I need in terms of dance floor, or sometimes the dance floors are better, definitely at that time of year.
Yeah, and I agree. And I always say this to couples as well. I say, you've got the perfect opportunity here, because your wedding it's not going to be sunny after your first dance, and people aren't going to go out. So stay on the dance floor for a few songs afterwards, get everybody on, and that's a good opportunity to get lots of dance and stuff, which unfortunately like a lot of summer couples miss out on, because like you say, after the first dance everyone's like, we have no obligation to be here anymore, see you later, I'm off.
Which I think if that kind of evening aspect is really, really important to you, I think it's probably a really solid reason maybe to get married at the other end of the year. Where if you are a couple that aren't as fussed by having like a packed dance floor, and you just want like a nice evening like ambience, to have like a summer venue and book a June wedding where it doesn't get dark till like 9:30, where you could just have someone playing in the background and you just kind of say chatting and milling and stuff. That's kind of much better, isn't it?
That's why I say I'm biased, got married in September, but September is like prime time. It's like, it's a good long-ish day, but then once the party starts, the party is starting, there's nothing going on outside.
I think that the kind of April, May or September
April, May
is the best for that reason, because everything lines up really conveniently. Like if we could pick a schedule for a wedding, it would be that, wouldn't it? That that sunset is pretty much really ideally between the end of speeches and the beginning of first dance. So you miss all of that, like that kind of lull, if you like, if there is one, is taken up with you taking the couple out for sunset. You haven't got to grab them out during dinner. You haven't got to wait till you haven't got to try and find them on the dance floor to then take them out for sunset. But they still get hopefully a day which is sunny enough that they get to be outside, but not too hot that people are like, or that everyone's losing their ties and moaning that it's like ridiculous. And
100%. So, I fully agree. So it's only been a couple of weeks since we last caught up, but obviously it is like a downtime sort of thing. So we're doing things other than filming weddings. So what have we been up to? What have you been doing for the last couple of weeks?
Again, like that, all those kind of lists of slower tasks that you think, I'll get to that. So there have been some changes on my website. I've been starting to do some of that stuff, starting to change up some stuff there. You introduced me to the wonders of ChatGPT. So I now have they're basically my pal that sits in my office for me now, and they get talks out to me on a daily basis. And ask them the wonders of the world, and that has been really, really helpful, I think, for someone that talks as much as I do, I actually really struggle with words or putting them to paper anyway, and describing what I do or using that or in a way that would appeal to a client. So I think having kind of a voice of reason there, or something like chat, where you can go, this is kind of, what I do, or this is the work that I'm trying to market with, what aesthetic does this give you, what words should I be using, and that stuff. I found that really, really useful. Just kind of marveling at the wonders of AI and kind of
I think it's cool that you're using that now. And I think for a while it's been very much people that don't use it regularly probably look at it and think it's this tool of, I don't want to go through AI because, Google's going to look at my website and think, it's written by AI and things like well, they see it as it's going to do everything for me. But what it's really good is doing those niche things that you just think, I don't know enough about this. Like changing a bit of wording in something which might sound, you've written it and it doesn't quite sound right, so you put it through, or trying to find a different word because you've used cinematic too much, or those kind of things.
I think my biggest worry was that again, if I used AI, is that it would sound like it would written by AI, and because I'm such a personal brand, and I think most of us are kind of, unless you are kind of running studios or have lots of associates, most of us, we are our businesses, and so your website needs to sound like you, because if it sounds really polished and like this and that, and then when they meet you on a call or at the wedding, you're nothing like that, there's a disconnect. So I think that's what's always put me off. Is like, no, I'll write my copy so it sounds like me.
Yeah.
But if anything, by now starting to train or have these chats with the AI, it's just allowed it to become a much more concise version of me, which still keeps my tone.
Yeah.
You find that it hasn't used words that I wouldn't use, or kind of put them in ways. It's just kind of found ways to make it more succinct or more polished, so that it's readable and grammatically correct.
Yeah,
I love a comma. If you can stick a comma in somewhere, whether it needs it or not, it's getting a comma. And so just kind of making things. Like I was finding this, and I do a lot of my summer weddings do end up being for teachers, and I do think sometimes they must read my copy and go like if they could get their red pen out and write like C- on it for too many uses of commas, it'd be there.
But that's the thing. So I think sometimes if you're writing your own copy from cold, then it doesn't sound like you. Even if you've written it yourself, because you're trying to do something which is very unnatural to the majority of humans, is just describe things on a website in like small little sentences, and trying to get your personality across using just text is
especially
really
when
difficult.
all of us, hopefully, our strengths lie in visuals.
Yeah.
Like I became a photographer because of my love of creativity, but also because I much prefer to take pictures of things or draw things, or use visuals to. Like, I'm that person that won't sit and make a note in a notebook about if I remember copying something off the wall. I'll just take a picture of it.
Yeah.
Or however, and it's there's these kind of, I'm sure there's like set names for them about how people learn in different ways.
Yeah.
Like, and I am a visual learner. Like, you could explain to me how to do something for 20 minutes, and I go, oh, cool, I'm bored now.
But if you just
watched a YouTube video about it, or you showed me, I've got that. And I do pick things up quite quickly. And so I think that it's a really great tool for people, particularly like us, that are in the kind of more visual industries. I think of it kind of as a helping hand rather than a robot which is going to murder me and tie me up in the corner one day and take over my business.
It's great for that sort of stuff. And obviously we're not copy experts. And while obviously there are people who write copy for you out there, I do think AI is a lot of the way there, and will probably eventually be most of the way there, in terms of if you haven't got the budget for a copywriter, or you think that, like me, you probably change your website quite a lot and you're going to pay someone to write your copy, but then a year down the line your brand has changed. AI is going to be so, maybe I'm ruffling some feathers, but I say AI is going to replace copywriters. But I think if there are certain uses for it that, if you like budget, or if you change your brand a lot and things like that AI is going to be really useful for.
I think it's quite an interesting thing, and it segues into the topic for today really, really nicely, is that I think the biggest kind of resounding thing that I kind of realised, or when you kind of dig into any AI, is that it can only know what it knows from out there. Like, it is artificial intelligence in that it's just a really quick way of scanning everything that exists and helping you with it. And some of that knowledge you wouldn't be able to find, or you'd spend hours and hours Googling to find this thing, particularly when it comes to writing odd bits of code or doing this and that. But it is only as good as the things that already exist out there, which for the most part are probably written by copywriters, which is why it really helps you with tone. So I do wonder, we're going to end up in this vicious cycle soon, is that when that percentage of the amount of copy that exists on the internet is actually written by AI against written people with English degrees and professional copywriters, is to how much in the end that AI will dilute itself.
So I heard something recently, I listened to a podcast, and it's quite dangerous for AI, not dangerous, but it's not great for AI to learn from itself. And like you say, AI is probably writing a lot of dodgy blog posts and things right now. And then also it'll get trained again. And when it gets trained again, it'll be looking at those dodgy blog posts that it's wrote and learning from itself. And apparently that's only going to make it worse and worse as time goes on.
It's like genetic mutilation, but of copy. Essentially,
So apparently there's this fear that AI is only going to get worse from here on out, because at the moment it's trained entirely on human content. But in the future it's going to be trained on its own stuff, which doesn't really sound human in a lot of the ways that it should. So
which means it's even more of a reason to jump on it now and like get it while it's good.
Yeah,
while at the moment there is only a small portion of people using it, and most of the copy that it's trying to learn from has been written by actual copywriters and stuff. Yeah,
weird topic, but I've heard recently, I haven't used it in a while, but I've heard GenFill has gotten a little bit worse since it started. Like, it's just generating weird things. Have you had that
again, because it's been through the off season, I haven't used it
Yeah.
as much since probably, October, November, and I've still found that I've used it more for, again, just kind of a lot of time it learns from what's in the image. Like, I've got a fire extinguisher and it knows where before, like, normal fill would try and put something random there. It knows that that's a curtain and gives it an end or a wall or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think particularly with stuff where it wants to start you moving hands, or particularly if there's like kind of people in the background and stuff, I think some of the human element of it has definitely become more distorted, or I've been seeing things that's been the case as well.
Yeah.
That if anything, it hasn't improved in that aspect. That particularly with human elements, that it's been weird.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't use it enough to know. I just heard a few people talking about it, and I was like, kind of makes sense, because again, if it's learning from the things that it's placing in there, and people are using it for all kinds. And I know from I used AI to edit. I had this we went to London and did this shoot. We just got sort of walking around with cameras. Yeah. We thought, we'll get some headshots while we're there. I was wearing a black hoodie, and I thought, okay, this doesn't look great for business, so I'll change it into a black t-shirt.
Yeah.
So I did that, and it all looked great. And then when I went back to show Kate, because Kate was like, oh my God, like that's amazing. So a few months later, I went back to show Kate how I did it, and it put like this black fur coat on me or something. And I was like, how has that changed so much? But
the other thing that I found with GenFill over the thing as well is that my grade, so my Camera Raw grade, has grain in it.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it naturally has grain built in it to kind of soften stuff or make it kind of feel not as kind of polished. I like that look for my photos. Is that if I then GenFill a chunk of stuff, it does a really good job of filling with content what that thing looks like.
Yeah.
But if you go into an 100% crop, it doesn't carry the grain pattern across.
Oh, right, okay.
So sometimes I'm finding that I've got like a little smooth bit in my photo. So I'm finding that I'm having to, even still, particularly if it was quite a big area or quite a big object I was looking to remove, that I'm having to let the AI do the heavy work in replacing that, and then almost using a feather in it with a bit of a clone brush afterwards from other patches of the photo, just so that it doesn't stand out that I've got this kind of shape cut in, which hasn't got the grain pattern across of it. Because if a couple went to make a big print of that, you'd see it.
You'd see it, yeah.
Or enough that you go, oh, that looks weird.
Yeah.
But then I don't want to also then not grain my images and have to find a way of adding that grain uniform across after export, because that becomes like a whole nother step. And especially when I'm only using GenFill for probably literally a handful.
It's interesting that it doesn't carry across the grain into the stuff it fills.
I would think it would be clever enough to know that there is that kind of grain pattern or imperfection in the image,
because it carries across like grades and things, doesn't it? Or like it pretty much replicates the color and the style.
It does, but even I think I've found it, even if you're doing GenFill to particularly really high ISO images, that sometimes it doesn't always carry the noise over either. Okay. It almost will naturally give you like a bit of a smooth version of it. Clean, so if you're trying to take something out of a sky which has got a little bit of noise in it, it's got that kind of like white bubbly bits of noise, and all of a sudden you've got like a black box.
Yeah.
Which, when you're zoomed out in a whole image, you might not even notice it, because the colour is the same as the other colour, but that lack of grain or noise is what makes that stand out. It's interesting.
Yeah,
it might be worth, if people are using it in that, particularly on dance floors or in kind of lower light areas, or again, they use kind of grain like I do, it might be worth just pulling some of those all the way up to 100% and seeing if it's doing your photos as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when it's the off season, I like to like experiment a little bit, and I've found something which again is like a software. I think it technically is AI sort of thing, but so many of you will know that I don't use ND filters, so I love to crank the shutter, and it's great because I can get screenshots from all of my even stuff that moves fast, and it looks like it's it's captured in time. It's a photo sort of thing, almost looks like a photo, but like I guess some people will notice, couples probably not, but I found a software now that can go through your videos and
it can
simulate the motion blur, and it seems to be really good. I've tried it like a little bit, and I've not actually purchased the full version yet, but I think I'm going to do it just for like, I don't think it's particularly needed on like dark rainy days and things like that, but in the middle of summer, in the height of summer when I'm filming, I've been filming on f1.4 lenses, right? And I even need to stop that down. I'm still shooting at 1/8000. And there are times where I'm like, okay, that's a little bit too much, if you know what I mean. Maybe it could do with some motion blur.
If you're shooting at 50 frames a second,
Yeah.
if you're on ND, you'd be aiming for like 100th and you're on like an 8000th or whatever.
Yeah.
There's going to be definitely a shutter difference.
And there's diminishing returns after 1/100 anyway. But 1/8000 is probably... I mean, again, couples will never notice, but it's just one of those things that might improve the quality by that 1%. That might, might make it a little bit more visually pleasing. And I put it on top of some of my Como shots because I thought that's going to be the brightest footage I can possibly find, and particularly the confetti shot because you've got people's arms moving and confetti in the air. It doesn't do much for the confetti, but for the people's arms, it is really good. So,
and it adds to that kind of drama or cinema feel, I suppose, that you would get from that
there's something about it.
Yeah.
I put it on some of the boat shots with the couple on the boat, and it just when I was watching it, I was like, well, I kind of get it now.
Yeah.
But I would never be the person who wants to keep putting ND filters on and off. So yeah, this software might be.
But now that you've moved over to the 2870, and you're pretty much going to be a one lens wonder on a wedding anyway.
Yeah.
Would that not tempt you to use an ND? Because then you wouldn't be changing it all the time.
Yeah, I have been tempted for sure, especially as. Like you say, I'm going to be using pretty much one lens for the whole time. That lens has quite a large filter, so I don't know that there's been people that recommend getting a smaller ND and then stepping it down or stepping it up.
Will you not get vignette in then though?
Apparently not.
Okay.
I guess it depends on the type of stabilization you're using, but I saw a YouTube video that put like a smaller ND than what it actually should be and stepped it down and still didn't get vignette in from it. That's really interesting.
Yeah, because normally you would think, especially if you were putting a smaller filter that wasn't the size of the glass, that would be the first place that, I've seen things, in terms of film cameras or people using 35mm lenses on medium format cameras or people using APS-C lenses on full frame cameras. And as long as you're zoomed in over a certain focal length, you don't get the little box, but you would always get like vignette in because it's not that. So that's super interesting.
It's just another thing to think about as well. Like I want it to match with my other cameras. And then if I've got like Kate with me second shooting or someone else, I would need probably the same variable ND filter for them to make sure the color cast is the same. Like Josh lent me an ND filter for Como, and I used it for a little bit, and the footage looks so different, like in color wise, to the rest of my footage, that I end up not being able to use a lot of what I actually
use. An ND, isn't it, for anyone? Maybe a photographer doesn't know too much about sort of ND filters and stuff. It's pretty much like sunglasses for your camera, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that if you put, I put your sunglasses on or you put mine on, that there's still different grades in that, isn't there? Or different NDs made by different companies are still going to have that slightly different, say, variation. And because you are physically putting something over the lens, it makes a difference to what comes in.
Yes.
And you are going to
It's always going to change the colours a little bit. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so this software, if you do use, if you're someone that likes to shutter crank, might be a way forward.
Yeah, but you still want that kind of that blur feel to it. Yeah,
because then I can go through and get my screenshots and everything. Then I can just add the blur and we're good to go. So,
and I think as well, like we would, quite circle around the subject too much, is that for you've worked in this way, cranking the shutter since dot.
Yeah.
So even something as adding a filter in it would change the whole way that you work, of being like, if you, rather than cranking your shutter to get exposure, you're twisting the density of the ND because you're holding your shutter. It would definitely take, like we said, that muscle memory, and it's another added level of thing you've got to be mindful about on the wedding, rather than focusing on what's in front of you, because you're changing the way that you work, aren't you?
100%. If you change lens and you changing threads, and what about when I've got a 3-camera setup for an outdoor ceremony? I've got to have that same ND on all those 3 cameras. So it's just like, it's just a lot. I just don't like too many things when I'm just, there's a reason I've got 2870. I like the idea of just having one camera in my hand and I can just have full sort of open-mindedness about it.
I think for what we do as well, stuff does happen so much and you've got to be so alert for seeing moments or seeing things. And I always find that, that's why some people find it mad when I say that I shoot, a lot of days on aperture priority, or even recent when I'm in mirrorless, changing to auto ISO.
Yeah.
It was like, to a degree now, I don't really have to worry unless I'm in a slower setting, like a portrait setting, or sometimes in a dance floor. I don't have to worry about my settings.
Yeah.
I know that I can turn into the shadow or out into the light or wherever, and all I have to worry about is the content that was within my frame and where I point the thing and getting it.
Yeah.
Not worrying about like, is that shutter going to be high enough to blur that, or is that going to be that enough? It's like I can see that I've got an image in front of me and I can compose with so much more. Like it hurts a lot less that you can see a moment playing out, but you've got a white screen because I can't scroll the ISO dial quick enough to get an image out of it.
Yeah.
That it takes that level of
There's a painful feeling. Yeah.
For me, it's always about the end result. I think rather than, you've got to know what you're doing.
Even if it's slightly off, you've caught it in a way
exactly
that you can
fix
fix
it. Or enough
it.
and there is enough latitude in the files now that you can do it. And in the end, you come to know that your style for an aperture that you can roughly work with, or, in groups, I know that I've got to raise it a little bit, but for the most part, I like to know where I sit. And in this light, the shutter will roughly be that. But that's a level of thing that I don't need to worry about.
Yeah. And like you say, the RAWs are quite forgiving now, aren't they? So
definitely.
You've got a lot of space to over or under expose a little bit and correct
I think, definitely.
Which leads quite on to what
we're
going to talk about.
Like I was thinking about this the other day, and I don't know, maybe it's the ideas of feeling old, or the tools that we had to disposable even a couple of years ago, let alone 10 years ago, is that I think we've never, as creatives, we've never had access to so much content or other people's work so easily. And we've also never had so many tools or apps or softwares at our disposal to make our jobs easier.
Yeah.
But I wondered, and so this is the question that I sent you in a garbled voice note whilst I was coming back from my dog walk, is that I was like, this I think would make a great episode, is all this technology, whilst it is wonderful, actually killing our creativity?
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of sometimes creativity can be bred by limitation.
Yep, agreed.
Like if you're stuck at the front of a ceremony, you've only got a 50mm, you've got to find a way to make that work, whether you're pinned against the wall or you're whatever. You try and find ways to be creative or make something from your limitations. Where now, if you're saying you can stand somewhere with a lens which zooms from 28 to 70 at pretty much a prime lens's aperture, you know that there's a range of dynamic range in there that can do that. Then there's softwares to save this and that. Like, you can be pretty lazy and still get something which is okay, but it doesn't breed creativity in that moment, does it? Or allowing that, like you're almost giving yourself too many options, which is equally as stifling as having no options.
Yeah, I completely understand that point of view. So my personal opinion is it doesn't kill creativity. It actually just opens the door to be more creative. I think if you're, how do I describe it? So if you're obviously coming from a position where when you started this job, there wasn't as much tools at your disposal and you had to, for video, you had to manual focus. And now you're saying all these autofocus people, you've got it easy.
Same as I have with autofocus.
Yeah. And things like that. Then I can understand that, anyone can do it now because all you've got to do is tap the screen and it will focus. But the fact that anyone can do it surely means that people becoming people that wouldn't have been necessarily patient enough to learn all that stuff beforehand are, they've got the creativity in their brain. When they pick up a camera, they're like, oh my God, it's not focusing. How do I get this depth of field? Why is the auto mode's rubbish on it? Whereas now, auto modes are great, autofocus is great. So you can generally, if you're not as experienced, but you still have the creative bone in your body, pick it up and make something good. And that's what I think phones and phone cameras become so popular, because it's enabled all these people with creative brains, but perhaps not the patience to learn a camera to become creators, if that makes sense. Yeah,
and I guess there's always going to be an element to this that some people just think that in the end that now that it because it is so easy that it's maybe not, it does allow anybody in, that's what people are in the industry are trying to gatekeep. And I don't think that's the case, because there is so much. The fact that we do this podcast, these didn't exist, and we're offering you knowledge. You can watch most things on YouTube now to give you knowledge about how to do something. So there is ways, but also I think not only about having technology that allows you to stifles you as a creative. But before, and I was saying this to a couple at the wedding fair that was at the weekend, is that they were like, we just find it really hard to know what we want. And I was like, because all you're doing is looking at lots and lots of photos. So you're going, I like that, I don't like that, I don't like that. It's like you're not thinking about why you don't like them or what you want your day to be.
Yeah.
All you're seeing is, that's a pretty picture, don't like that picture.
Yeah.
And I was like, but you can sit there now. I was like, if this was 20 years ago, you'd sit and probably look for your parents' wedding album. You might have seen your friends' wedding photos, and the bridal magazine that you bought at WH Smith's would be your avenues of seeing other people's wedding photos. When now you can sit in bed pretty much every night and you can scroll through 50 people's weddings in literally like 2 swipes of Instagram and see everything from the latest celebrity that's got married on a yacht somewhere, kind of to their like beautiful other half, down to a super alternative wedding in a village hall. And you see that it's literally, and they're next to each other, and you're naturally making comparisons. And so you're not almost seeing things with a vision. You're just, and I think as creatives, you know, we've spoken loads about imposter syndrome or being stifled. And I think some of that just becomes from consuming so much.
Yeah.
So it's
definitely.
like, then people argue, it's like, well, what's the point in being creative? Because somebody would have done it anyway.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, people definitely have, but they just haven't seen the other person do it. So they kind of get that buzz of like, oh, I made this, or I'm doing this and nobody else is.
Yeah.
And someone's not come along and go, yeah, I invented 2 years ago, mate.
Yeah.
Like,
Whereas
so
now we see,
yeah.
you know, I'll see a wedding, I'll make a great wedding film, open Instagram, see one that I think, oh, that's amazing. That makes mine look, yeah.
But now, but if you look at that as a standalone piece, so I think sometimes it's not always technology, which is maybe killing creativity. Some of it is consumption as well. But then that's a product of, I think, the fact that the technology's allowed us to have so much content at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And in any place. The fact that, you know, that doom scrolling is real is that I think there are definitely times when you need, or you're like the idea of going to an art gallery, you go through that door, you pay your ticket money, you stand in that space which is bespoke to consume art.
Yeah.
Not when you're sat on the toilet, like scrolling on your phone, you know, like
true.
You take those things in so differently. And so I do find it quite an interesting thing, or something I definitely want to talk about. Or I think it's a good subject, or hopefully will spark.
I think it's a good subject.
Some conversation.
I think that it's a lower barrier of entry to show your creativity now.
Yeah.
It's like if you're a graphic designer back in the day, I don't know when back in the day is, but you would have had to learn like Illustrator, which is quite a daunting software
which still
to
wasn't
learn.
that long ago. You know, it's gone from people literally cutting out pieces of artwork and sticking them to pieces of paper and then photographing them, which then went on to the first versions of Photoshop or Illustrator.
And then you learn in vectors and you're trying to figure out how to do things. Now you can open Canva and just get one of their templates and then create something in seconds. Yeah. And even if you don't use a template, there's a ton of features on there which makes creating like very simple graphics pretty easy. Or you can generate it with like graphics generators out there. I was baffled. Like when I went on holiday in January, I went with my brother-in-law, and it was his birthday while we were there. So his wife had made him a birthday card, and it was like a picture of me and him, and she'd managed to chop us out of other photos and put us together, and then like superimposed us like in like Universal where we were or whatever, and then she'd managed to find pictures of like her and all of their children, and then like my wife looking sad, and like put them on the back and like, sorry, we're not with you. And then and I was like, she's done this, like. And I was like, how does she do it? Oh, she's got a Canva Pro account because she uses it for work. And it managed to do all the cutouts. Obviously, it's quite a degree of creativity to think of the idea and put it together. Yeah.
But in terms of the actual technology, I remember like when like revelations of Photoshop, like what, you can actually cut people out or you can move that.
Yeah.
And it's like, now that's a tool that you can literally do 2 clicks on an account and you're there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to try and dumb down like the achievement of it, but like you say, the barrier to entry in doing that stuff, or even in our businesses, before it might be, I need to go speak to a graphic designer about getting a logo or getting a color scheme, where now there's like color scheme generators on most things, or there's loads of apps that should design me a logo for this, and it's there. And it's
but don't you think that maybe as in the wedding industry as well, that so obviously like we're talking about the barrier of entry, which means that over the last 10 years or whatever, there's so many more photographers or wedding photographers than there were before. So many more wedding videographers. In fact, wedding videography is probably growing huge right now.
At a faster rate than photography, I think now,
and so the barrier of entry is lower. And now most people who sort of enter this industry now can create really good looking films. Yeah. So do you think that because of that, it's isolated the other things that aren't the filming? So maybe, I don't know whether it's just because we're in the space at the moment, and we talk to other photographers and videographers quite a lot, and listen to podcasts and things. But right now there's a focus on, it's that experience on the day that matters and things like that. And maybe you have to really show that you've been to this many weddings and that you can bond with the couple and things like that. I feel like maybe 15 years ago, it was about if you've got the 5D Mark I and a 70-200, then you're a wedding photographer.
But I think again, it's relative, isn't it? Because the couples consumed less.
Yeah.
they wouldn't, because they couldn't sit and find 20 photographers in their area at the tip of their fingertips. They much more took stall on recommendations or who was the first person in the Yellow Pages or whatever. And because they consumed less, they would sit at your studio and go, oh, I like these photos, and they would book. Where now I don't think you can get played off as much. It's so easier for them to sit there with 2 photographers, 3 photographers and videographers in front of them and go, well, which do we like the best?
Yeah.
But it's never been easier for people to make, like, I feel that particularly people coming in, or even people that have been in a degree of time like us, I still sit and look at other people's work and go, oh, I really like that. Should I be like that? Should I move to be more like them? And it's like, well, no, as a creative or as an artist, I want to have, you know, a unique enough voice that I stand out amongst the crowd, but also not be too off the wall that people feel like it's a risk to book me because I don't look like everything else.
Yeah.
And so it's finding that balance or finding creative ways into things. I do find that hard to walk that balance, because you know now that for most of your couples, they're looking at a lot of other stuff as well.
Yeah.
So that you need to have that level of quality and experience to be trusted, but still kind of be exciting to book because you are a little bit different to everything else that's out there.
Yeah. So it's easier to enter, but it's much harder to stand out in any creative space.
And you think of, think of like the pioneers in your industry, or the people that are the big names in your industry. It's because their films were radically different at the time.
Yeah.
You know, like we use like the Fire and Ice example, and the fact that was a style of film which at the time very few other people were doing.
Yeah.
Which when it breaks across an industry, you're like, wow, this is so different. And there's people that try and emulate it. There's people that go, it'll never last, and are skeptical of it. But it does, and it moves on, and now it's known almost the style is pioneered by them. And in photography, it's the same, isn't it? It's that. But then I feel that because social media has allowed trends to form in our industries a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Like I feel even when I came in 10 years ago, bows were in, pink was in, but the weddings themselves had trends because that was led by fashion of dresses or whatever.
Yeah.
But there wasn't necessarily trends in photography or trends in, there were just wedding photographers.
Yeah.
And some were maybe more traditional and some were more thing. But there was never like, oh, we have to have this photo because it's trendy, or we have to do that. I want this in my film.
The editorial.
Because they almost want that.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, like the twirl transition. Like someone might come to you now and go, I've seen this in someone's film, I really want that. Which is quite a technical thing. Where people before it, you go, I just want a lovely film.
Yeah.
And your approach to be this.
Yeah.
Like almost like where they consume content, they've almost been given more education over those things now.
Yeah.
Than in the past they would have.
Which is why it's more important than ever to stand out, and it's like much harder than ever to stand out. But if you look at, like you say, there's a lot of people in our industry that have, you know, that stand out because their films are radically different. But I also think there's a lot of people that stand out and their photos and videos are not much different to everyone else, but they're doing unique things outside of that.
Yeah.
Like maybe unique BTS, or, you know, they're showing up and, you know, they've got something which people love what they do on TikTok or love what they do on Instagram. And because they're standing out by doing something different, the creativity isn't in their actual work on the day, it's in now how they're promoting themselves.
Yeah, and I guess there are some people that, again, and we've spoken about it, you know, other times where I think this is an industry, and it's like, we said, the barrier to entry is low, but it's never the barrier of entry to not be creative and just see something for what it is and go, well, as long as I can make that for a bunch of people, they'll be happy.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be an artist or a creative.
Yeah.
You just need to be very good at understanding what goes into making that and then replicating it lots, or almost being what I would deem, because I'm someone that kind of pride myself on being a creative. You know, I was interested in art or drawing or music or other things before. And I love the creative process and could talk about it. Where if you are coming into it purely from a business point of view and go, I just want to shoot weddings because it's a pretty nice gig to do.
Yeah.
I think it's easy at the moment to be a lazy creative, and maybe I'm just overthinking it. You don't need to be creative, or that's maybe another episode in itself. Is, do you actually need to be creative to work in the wedding industry?
So I put does it actually matter? Because I think that with photo and video, 60% of it is who you are, and only 40% of it is really the creativity, right? At the moment, because we're talking about standing out, I would say if people said to me, I would say that, okay, edit wise is where the creativity comes in for me.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that. I'd say probably 80% of my shots at a wedding aren't creative. They're they're just what you would expect it to be.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I guess I am trying to be creative, but most of it's just what you would expect. It's just...
Yeah, and at the end of the day, most of us are still photographing or videoing the same thing. Most of the weddings we go to, there is a ceremony, there is a confetti line, there is some group shots. So there's only so much that you can do around the same thing to make it different, whilst also honouring what the couple's needs are from the day. There are only certain opportunities that I would say that you can be really creative. Again, there's 100 different ways you can photograph a group shot, and there's certainly, some people prefer to do on a really long lens, so you get that really kind of tight and fall off. Some people don't care and they're creative choices on a base level.
True.
But it's not as if I'm only taking a photo of like half of each of the bridesmaids' face, so you get a real long panorama with that would be like a really creative choice. Or you think of you as a thing, like, I use a really wild thing which no one ever do, is like, I'm going to put a 360 in the bouquet, so that when the couple comes down the aisle, it's almost like her walking towards, like a POV thing. That would be like a very bold creative choice to make, because you wouldn't see anything else, but it would look uniquely different. And I'm sure there's a handful of people who go, oh, that's so cool. And some people go, I just want to see my face.
Exactly.
And so creativity's got to be used in the right way, that it still harnesses the emotional, our couple's needs of what they want out of wedding photography.
Yeah.
But we are still doing the same thing, aren't we?
Yeah.
There's a fly in here, isn't there?
There is, yeah. It's really,
I think where we've got a bright light on us as well, it's drawn to the dome, and it keeps bouncing off of it and like following around us. So technically this is a guest episode as well now, isn't it? me, you and the blue bottle, that's it. So you see us wandering like this, we're not we're not seasick. there is a fly in here.
Fly around. I think we've spoken about it before, how I think photography is more creative on the day anyway, I think, and video is more creative afterwards. But I just think in terms of filming, yes, I might get some nice looking shots and things like that, but I think it's the editing that is where the creativity comes in. And when you're trying to be natural, like a lot of couples describe my work as natural, and like that's the word that they use. I've now picked up on it and used it, but like when I say to couples, why have you contacted me, they say because it's natural. And I put that down to, I'm not putting a 360 in the bouquet and trying to, or I'm not doing crazy transitions all the time and things like that. And so I wouldn't say, on my H1 on my website, creative wedding videographer.
Yeah, but and I guess it's maybe different for everyone. Like, and it's really interesting to have this chat with you. And I'm not dumbing down that you're not creative at all. I'm not saying that, but we've been both quite open for the reasons that we started running our businesses.
Yeah.
And for yours was more, you came in for the tech and the idea of using cameras and running a business, where your big draws, where the idea of me was to do an art-based job and not have to go and get a real one.
Yeah.
So like that, I think that desire to be creative, I think, is something which you have to either have. You don't have to have it to shoot weddings.
Yeah.
But you can. And maybe that's why this topic even came to my mind in the first place, is because I feel now that maybe that not needing it is more important than ever. But then I think, like you've said in the notes as well, is there's probably only a few photographers out there that you would actually call, like, and not even creative, but innovative.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I guess we're all creative in a way.
They take that creativity to a level of innovation that you can see a style of shot, or they're the people that then people do start replicating, because that style they could never have thought of that in their own creative brain.
Yeah.
And I think for me, in order to have longevity doing this, I always have to have that creative desire that one day I'm going to have this light bulb moment at a wedding, or I'm going to see something and have this like vision of like, oh, we could create this.
Yeah.
And I've had that a couple of times at weddings where, and couples can feel that excitement in that you're really enjoying, oh, we could do this and it could be different, or, oh, there's like a reflection there to be had. And maybe because you're more creative than they are, something which is really simple to you maybe is like, by like a reflection from your watch, is like, oh, that's so sick.
Yeah.
Where it's, they've not seen it before, or even just you getting excited by collaborating with them on that creative process. Like that chase of that, my best work, I still haven't made it yet because I haven't been inspired in that way.
Yeah.
That's what maybe excites me to keep going back to weddings, or doing, to keep pushing on or keep being creative, rather than just making the same work that I am now until the day that I retire.
Yeah, 100%. I do think we all have that in us. And that's where sort of the motivation comes from. That's what separates us.
Yeah, it's that, and that's what it is, yeah.
And I'm dumbing it down. I think we are creative. I just think that there's a lot more, it's obvious that there's more creatives out there right now. But yeah, it's interesting the way you say that, because we've spoken about it, how I got into it for the business, and like when I think about the job and what we do, I'm thinking a lot of me is thinking about how can I make it simpler? How can I earn more and do less and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And like my goals for the year or for like year on year are normally more business based than like looking at the actual film. Like how can I tell a story better or things like that? They do usually more, okay, well, analytically, I want to be doing this here, and next year I want to be doing a few less hours here and things like that. And
or I'm filming too much of this, which is kind of a waste of my time for how much it takes up in the film.
Yeah. And I understand, like, I'll definitely, like, have much more of a passion, definitely have a passion for what we do. It's not that I don't, I'm in it for the business or the money.
And I was trying to put that across and trying to say that it's not as if you are literally here because it's a cool way to make money, but but the beginnings or the drivers maybe are
100%.
when the reasons that we started maybe slightly different.
And looking at your goals year on year, because your goal might be to have your work shown in the gallery somewhere or things like that, whereas my goal would be do one less wedding, earn the same amount, like, or something, or just to very simplify it. It's
Or if I had a wedding which I knew that the opportunity to be creative or somewhere that really inspired me to go and the budget wasn't quite there, I would be more inclined to go to the wedding that inspired me more than the wedding that paid me the most.
Yes.
Whilst I'm running a business, I still have bills to pay.
Yeah.
To be creatively fulfilled is as much as a driver in the reason that I do this job as to being rich.
Oh, 100%. That I've said on this pod before, I think that destination weddings didn't interest me a hell of a lot. But after how much that destination wedding inspired me and how good I felt, like filming it, editing it, putting it all together, like posting it everywhere, like that's like led me to take a couple more, which in reality isn't a very good business decision because I don't earn the same amount as I do here, but creatively it inspires me, it gets me.
But for someone that loves to travel and has a thirst for adventure as much as you do, that element automatically sparks interest, doesn't it, or creativity, and to create somewhere that you have never created before, that inspires creativity, doesn't it?
It does,
Or then sometimes you could argue that if you go to a venue 20 times that you have to be even more creative to try and make something unique in that venue rather than rely on the old classics. So maybe if you end up going back to the same hotel in the same destination 10 times, that thirst of creativity might just be for new destinations, not necessarily that particular place. But when the first time that you went to Como last year, that to have the opportunity of there being a lake in front of the venue and taking the couple on a boat ride in front of, like, they're all things that you would never normally piece into a UK barn wedding. So it instantly sparks your kind of creativity, isn't it? So
and that excites us, and then that's what makes you creative, right? Is if that sort of thing inspires you and excites you, then do more of it, basically.
Then maybe that's the hardest thing, though, because in the end, our venue, our business side of our thing is to kind of build trust with venues, build trust with couples, build good relationships with other suppliers, so that you end up working with them more and they refer you and stuff. But it's like, well, in the end, is being thrown in to somewhere with knowing nobody, venue you've never been to, do you argue then that's when you're at your most creative?
Yes, I think so.
Like, the idea of creativity comes out of discomfort, or
and that's why going on to like how this started is me using that 28-70 lens f2, and me just saying to you, this feels like a cheat code. It feels like I'm just being really lazy right now. And like we spoke about how using primes really forces you to be creative, because sometimes 100%. You just cannot get the shot that you want, so you've got to like figure out, okay, I'm using an 85mm that's suddenly in a tiny room with nothing going on. Is there a mirror I can shoot into to make it look like 100%, I'm further away, or rather than just zooming out? So it technically feels like maybe you wouldn't be getting the same shots as you would do.
And even something as simple as me is that when I went back, so I always used to use one fixed and then a zoom, and move into the classic 35-85. It started making me take more portrait shots sometimes just for that reach, because you are on a fixed focal length. It's like if I was in a church before and I knew that I could get to 24mm, I wouldn't just turn the camera long ways and get the slice of the ceremony with the roof of the building and get to cool building. I'd just zoom out, and all the stuff on the side was probably rubbish anyway. But that was the easy shot. Just go, pull it out. I've got the roof now that I want. I'll come back into the moment again. Where it's like, well, actually, I can turn the camera And although it's a very, very simple thing, that's still a creative decision, which then you look at that and go, okay, that's much better. And I'm going to say sometimes, and at the moment there's a trend in wedding photography, everyone's going back to like the magic of film. And it's like, film's not magical, it's a scientific process. There's silver stuff on a piece of plastic and you expose it to light and it comes that. But I think people that have never used it are finding the joy in the slower process.
Yeah.
That being more intentional with it, being more creative, because again they're stuck at 400 ISO because they've put that film in the back of their camera. They can't just whack it up in the dark and do that in the lights. They've got to embrace slower shutters in darker places, or they've got to manually focus in challenging situations, which then lead to slight disparities in focus. And if you've not experienced that because you're fairly new to the industry or only ever use a digital camera with dynamic range and manual and also focus, you're enjoying the creative process of using film, where you could argue that you could gaffer tape up the screen on your digital camera and flick it into manual and get a very similar experience.
Yeah, true.
But because you've got the options are stifling your creativity.
But I think people you're talking about people people who are already photographers who get film cameras, like it's nice to have that like extra bit of.
But even as a base level, like I have clients that over the last couple of years that have been, I love film. I shoot film when I go on holiday.
Yeah.
Because like, if I get my phone and just film my camera roll with just snaps. But the idea of them of going away with like their old camera and like, there's a really cool landscape, I'm going to take the shot, and then you wind it on and then having that idea of it's not immediate. It's you send that film off and you wait with excitement to see what comes back, and that's it builds that, doesn't it?
But I feel like that sort of technology like that we're talking about in this, that perhaps makes you feel less creative, is best used in the hands of somebody who has already been through the other side of it, right? So for example, I used 35 and 50 primes for the last 2 or 3 years, right? So I already know what I'm looking for before I pick up my camera.
Yeah.
Whereas someone who's just getting into videography picks up a 24-70, it's going to be constantly zooming in and out.
Or 18-200, all crap
they're just going to be stood in the corner of the room probably, and they're going to be zooming in and out, and they're not going to know what framing they want before they pick up their camera. Whereas I'm thinking, okay, I know exact shot I want. Yeah. Turn the zoom, and the same with gimbals as well. We've all seen people who start videography get a zoom lens, get a gimbal, and then just running around with it and just like hoping for the best, zooming in and out.
Because on a gimbal, it will look smooth and it'll be fine.
But in reality, you're not thinking about being creative. You're just like picking the gimbal up, turning it to a shot that you think looks good and cracking on.
So maybe it's not the technology that's killing our creativity, it's the choice.
It's the barrier of entry.
It's
being lower.
The choice that technology gives us means that you maybe don't have to. And again, I think, like I said, that hardship or that struggle or those limitations force you to be more creative. Or like you said, is that level of understanding the rules in order to break them. That you also know, even when you use that 28-70, that you know that 70mm is the best thing to shoot a speech on, because it will give you the longest distortion and the best fall off. Because you know that from shooting on 85, or if you go, I want 50, you would dial the camera in to 50 and then use it rather than just look at it and go, I
normally do. I normally sit it at 50, and if I'm not at 50, if I'm walking between different places, I'll set it to 50 so that it automatically starts on 50, and I can adjust it from there. So maybe it is that. And with that said, another thing that I've always thought was strange is when people say to invest when you're sort of starting up to get a cheaper camera and that kind of thing, because this camera's great value or whatever, just get that. But I've never really agreed with that. I've said get the camera that does the most things for your budget, basically, because those things, like, so for example, right, you go right now and you go to the shop and you get an older camera that perhaps overheats. It's a crop sensor, that kind of thing. So you've got to buy you crop lenses for it and things like that. When you get to low light, you're soon going to realise that it's all noisy and things like that. And so for years you're making films that are noisy, and you're like trying to improve. But if you just get straight into it, that again, the barrier of entry is lower now to get straight into it. There's plenty of great full frame cameras, great in low light and great autofocus and things like that. But if you get straight into that, you avoid that sort of couple of years of just thinking, am I doing something wrong? Am I,
And the imposter syndrome sneaks in because you think it's you not being creative enough, or you're not technical enough way. Not is in that way the kit is holding you back.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I remember being at one of my very first weddings, second or third wedding that I ever did, and being there with my cropped, D90 camera with the kit lens on one, and then like a camera that I'd borrowed from the uni cupboard with my 50mm on the other. And there being a granddad at the wedding who literally had the D3 or 4 when it first came out, and he had the 35 1.4 on it. He had the 70-200 on his old camera that was still probably one of the first full frames.
Yeah.
And he was hanging in kit that like added up to more than probably everything that I owned at the time.
Yeah.
But that couple would still book me.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that when they got the photos back, although the stuff was probably pretty noisy in the church or this and that, there was still an eye to it or a level of understanding to it that they didn't just ask their granddad because he had the better camera.
Yeah.
Like you can put an amazing camera in non-creative hands
100%,
and it will get a base level of good because of its tech.
But you want to grow into it and you don't want to get something which you're going to grow out of pretty quick.
Or then you feel that the technology is stifling your creativity, that then in the end it hampers you from going on, doesn't it?
I look at a lot of people, at least when I first started videography, a lot of photographers shot with 70-200, and you just see they pick it up, they zoom to 200, snap, like, and all of their candidates are in 200 because blurry backgrounds and cool things, but like in reality, there's not a lot in it.
Or worse than that, the ones that I never did it. I am going to say hand on heart, I never did it, and I saw people's portfolios that were shooting with higher aperture lenses, and when the blur function came in Photoshop, that were literally just blurring an image and then just eraser the people back through because screens weren't high enough quality then, unless you were on a real kind of high def. It would just look like it had a blurry background, not in any form of like bokeh or whatever, but someone would almost kind of fake it in until you get a better screen and you can see the eraser marks around the person or whatever. And you look at that and go, maybe you should just bought an aperture lens.
So with that said, I do think like I would recommend someone to go out like before the 28-70 to go out and buy like a 50mm or like primes, just so that, because then you learn what you can do with focal lengths, and you can be creative, and you're limiting yourself on purpose, so that when it comes to like getting a zoom lens, you already know what you want.
And I think it's doing those things, like from someone that did a photography degree, I'm not sure that I would recommend that everybody go down the education route, but to use those things to educate yourself or give you discipline in a kind of technicality is far more useful than poring over theory books and marveling at kind of stuff in galleries. But I think coming from that level of, being given a roll of 35mm film and a camera with a fixed 50mm lens, so your zoom in and out was your feet, and you had 36 exposures, and then, then you came back, you developed it, and they made you print all of it with the borders on so you couldn't crop it, and then would review your work. I did that for the first, like a few months that I was there. It made you frame better, made you compose better. So now that hopefully when I go forward, that most of my work doesn't have to be cropped, because because sometimes you can't. If you're stuck with, in speeches and you're behind a table and you need to stand where the middle of the table is, you've got that option. But I always as much as I can, to do as much of that stuff, particularly framing and things like that in camera, as I can, or I'm not a creative in that I'd rather just shoot it wide because I've got enough megapixels to and it would
as you want.
And if you see people that do like really harsh crops on stuff, I think it's it's almost is do that legwork to make yourself a good creative.
But then maybe people now feel like they're limited as well, because like look at a few years ago on Instagram. I would say a few years, probably like 5-6 years ago, right? On Instagram, the people that use iPhones to content create, they probably had a camera which was okay and a wide lens which you just couldn't use in any kind of darkness, and then that's about it. And now you've got a wide lens which is actually really good, a camera which you can actually get depth of field on, and a telephoto camera which on the new iPhones is like 5 times or something, which people who with iPhones could never get. And so even with that, while we would have considered iPhones to be like, oh, that's easy photography, now it was limiting for them, and now it's got easier. Does that make sense?
It is. It's far less of a stifling tool than it was before. That access that gave, we've said all the way through, isn't kind of the barrier to entry, even with a phone now. In the right hands, if you be creative in that way, like I find that when you're at a wedding, or even I was at like a styled shoot a couple of days ago with some hair and makeup stylists trying to get content, and I was there shooting, and like one of them was like, oh, your camera's amazing, like that really makes such a difference. And I was like, makes absolutely no difference. It helps. But I was like, it's the fact that I've lit this properly. I know I've moved the model away from the twinkly lights behind, so I've got enough distance for them to be fall off.
Yeah.
And I was like, show me. I was like, give me your phone. Like, you've been taking videos. And again, I whacked it into the 2 or 3 times lens, took a few steps back, so I knew that would give me a tighter perspective. It wouldn't give me the 28mm wide thing. You know, whacked it in portrait mode, got the bride up, light still on her, showed her the photo, and I was like, well, there's my camera, and there's your phone.
Yeah.
And side by side on a base level.
Yeah. Especially on screens that small.
Pick the difference.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's like, so maybe then that did take a degree of, not even creativity, you could argue, but knowledge of that experience. Kit to get a similar result.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we should round it up there because we've got another episode to record.
We have got
very
another,
soon.
Very soon. But I think, and I feel like it is genuinely a topic we could go round and round and round in circles on for ages. So again, message us in if you have opinions on it, or again when we pop the reel out for this in a couple of weeks' time as well. I think hopefully that'll spark a bit of debate on our Insta as well.
Let us know what you think.
And also before we do sign off, I do want to talk to you. Thank you to the few people that have sent us voice notes and messages for our 50th episode, which is rapidly coming. If you haven't seen that reel, for episode 50, we would love you guys to send us, say, some emails, some DMs, some voice notes with questions or words of support or words of disgust if you don't like us.
Or just things that maybe you've heard on the podcast that you disagree with or you agree with or you want to elaborate on, just so that we can like read them out or play them out on the pod and we can sort of have a conversation about
and have a whole episode around that. And we think that'd be a really, really good thing to do for our 50th episode, which is only probably now a few weeks away.
Yeah.
So if you've got any of those, please do send them in. The more, the merrier. We've got an hour to fill with as many of those as we want, if we can read out. So let's do that.
I'm really looking forward to that. That should be good.
And then I can also reveal as well, if we haven't said already, that the episode that we are recording after this, which is Why We're in a Hurry, is a guest episode. And it's our first double guest episode, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's the first time that we are interviewing two people.
Yeah.
So super excited for that one. And I think we'll drop a few little teasers along the way. But really, really excited.
I don't know what order they're coming out in yet. So we
don't know. So it might even be the one that comes out soon before this or however. Yeah. But again, you keep an eye out for it. I think it has the potential to be a very good one.
It's going to be good. Yeah. 100%.
So amazing. Thank you so much for listening to our ramblings. Maybe that we've made you want to be more creative, or maybe we've resigned to the fact that you can never be creative now. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you
next one.